This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in-touch. Good evening. Tonight, why some members of RNIB Scotland fear the loss of its identity and its influence. And the older blind people who are now facing age-related deafness as well. How to cope and where to get help later in the programme. But first, 17 members of RNIB Scotland have written to its London headquarters protesting at changes in its administration, which they say will weaken the influence it's built up over a long period of time and could result in poorer services for visually impaired people in Scotland. Under the plans, RNIB Scotland would find itself reporting not to RNIB Charity directly, as it has in the past, but to Action for Blind People, originally an independent charity, which is now a member of what's known as the RNIB Group. RNIB Scotland member Anne Hamilton explained why they're so upset about it.
I am very angry, considering that as a membership-led organisation, we were not consulted, far less asked to vote or give our opinions on this move. I am not a commodity. I am not to be parcelled up and handed over to another organisation that I know nothing about. I am extremely angry about this, and I'm not the only person. I'm probably one of the few that will put their head above the parapet, because people are just a wee bit worried about the services that they're going to be getting.
Well, at the time of that recording, the group in Scotland had had no reply to its letter from RNIB Chief Executive Leslie Ann Alexander, from whom we'll be hearing in just a moment. But first, to discover why this administrative change has caused such a fuss, I've been talking to current chair of RNIB Scotland, Sandra Wilson, and her immediate predecessor, Ken Reid.
Already, most of the services that blind and partially sighted people depend on being delivered by government are already being delivered by the Scottish Government. There's nothing to do with Westminster whatsoever. And with the Smith Commission of last year and the outcomes of that, even more will be transferred to Scotland. So taking things away from Scotland at this time just seems to be contrary to common sense.
So you mean this feels like centralisation when you would say all the trend is devolution?
Exactly.
Is there just a hint of nationalism in this, Ken?
Not in the slightest, no. This isn't to do with how any of us may have chosen to vote last year in the independence referendum. This is about making sure that RNIB Scotland is established in a fit structure to deliver the best services to blind and partially sighted people in Scotland, given the environment in which we have to operate. We didn't choose how the Scottish Government would be established. We didn't choose how the people of Scotland would vote in the general election. But we have to live with that, and we have to make sure that how we work recognises that and is best fitted to do so.
But of course the RNIB does have the job of trying to make the absolute most of the resources it's got, and presumably what's being thought is that it makes more sense to have a lot of these services under one umbrella.
There is an element to which that could be the perception, but what it does also do is put at risk some of those resources, because there will be those who might have considered that they would like to contribute towards the resources of RNIB because they saw it being utilised in a good way by RNIB Scotland, who would fear that it would disappear into UK coffers and do no benefit to people in Scotland, or indeed to blind and partially sighted people in whatever part of the UK they may happen to be based in.
But will this really make a difference to the services that people in Scotland get, or is it more about politics?
It's both. There's definitely a political element to it, but politics are very, very important. In order that we should be able to provide the services that blind and partially sighted people need, then we need to be able to negotiate at a political level. And all of these decisions are made at Holyrood, not at the Parliament at Westminster. So RNIB Scotland needs to be fit to make those political movements.
So you mean you have a relationship with the Scottish Parliament that might be lost or weakened?
Exactly, yes.
Let me bring in Sandra Wilson, who is the current chair. You have to deal with this situation. What are you going to do?
Members are actually asking for a meeting, and we have now managed to arrange a meeting for the 21st of September. But this date is 3 weeks after the TUPE transfer is due to take place. TUPE is transferring staff from one organisation to another in a seamless transfer as it can possibly be. So what we're doing at the moment is going back to RNIB and asking them to defer the TUPE.
So the meeting that you've arranged is after that would happen. So
After that would happen,
you're afraid
yes.
this might be a done deal.
Yes, and also that it will impact on how members react, because they could still feel they're not being consulted.
On this issue of consultation, there has been a letter, hasn't there, from your organisation. Can you just explain about that?
17 members put their names to a letter that was sent to the chief executives of RNIB Group, RNIB Charity and Action for Blind People. They've had no response to that letter, and they're feeling very annoyed about that, and that their feelings have been ignored.
Sandra Wilson, and before that, Ken Reid. Well, listening to that is the RNIB Group's Chief Executive, Lesley-Anne Alexander. So, Lesley-Anne, can we deal with this letter? Why haven't they had a reply to their letter, or they certainly hadn't when we talked to them yesterday?
Yeah, I'm really, really sorry that we didn't reply to the letter. It was purely an error on my part. The letter called for us to make sure that the boards of both Action and RNIB were aware of the concerns of the 17 signatories to the letter. And we certainly did that. So we did what we were asked to do in the letter, but I just didn't close the loop by formally responding.
OK, so why are you making this change?
RNIB Group is quite a big and complicated organisation, and what we need to do is make sure that our organisation is as simple for people to navigate their way around as possible. Over the last 2 years, we have informally had the Chief Executive of Action for Blind People, which is now Miriam Martin, managing all 4 of our country delivery activities. So our directors in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and also all of our efforts in England. And what we've proved to ourselves over the last couple of years is that by making sure that the efforts in the 4 countries share knowledge, that we share our learning, what we've proved to ourselves is that we're able to deliver more consistently high quality services by ensuring that we're a learning organisation.
But what came over so strongly in those interviews, that they say over the time they've built up a really strong relationship with all kinds of organisations and individuals within Scotland, especially the Scottish Parliament, and they are fearful that this will weaken those relationships and their ability to campaign, which they think they've done very well.
And what I was going to go on to say, Peter, was that those relationships have been further enhanced over the last 2 years, where we've actually had RNIB Scotland being managed by the Chief Executive of Action for Blind People. So what we're doing now is formalising that. What we've proved to ourselves is that by bringing together the management of our 4 countries, we do not diminish the impact and the ability of the 4 countries to maintain their separate identities and to build and enhance those relationships.
But at this time, politically, isn't this just insensitive? It's centralisation rather than devolution, which is the absolute reverse of what's happening in so many other spheres, including government.
Peter, it's not centralisation at all. I'm really proud of the way that RNIB embraced the whole devolution agenda way before my time in the early 2000s. What we're doing is continuing to enhance what we do in the countries by being a learning organisation, so we bring our own experience to bear, but also making sure that the services that we deliver are tailored to the political and social and economic environments that we have across what is now a very complicated political structure within the UK.
But they do feel they're losing their identity. Anne Hamilton put it much more directly and personally. Perhaps she said, I'm not a commodity. You know, the clear implication that you're riding roughshod over their views, and you're not replying to that letter didn't help with that impression, did it?
Well, of course it didn't help, and I've apologised for not replying to the letter. We have now responded. We've had a huge number of responses to the consultation that's been going on, not only from blind and partially sighted people across the UK, but also our funders and also our staff. And I can only apologise that a letter fell through the net. But, you know, we need to move on from that. RNIB Scotland will not be losing its identity. We would be very foolish to interfere with the RNIB Scotland brand. Our relationships with the Scottish Parliament, with Holyrood, will not be diminished in any way. I hope they'll be strengthened from this. What we're missing are the advantages of formalising our current management arrangements, in that we're taking this opportunity to have a real look at how influential the RNIB Scotland Committee is. Now, our leading members in Scotland who form the committee have said to us that they would like more teeth, that they would like more power. And so hand in hand with reorganising our management, we are also starting from the 1st of September a consultation with our leading members about what more teeth would they like, what more power would they like the RNIB Scotland Committee to have. So I think we're going to come out of this with a stronger organisation in Scotland, the RNIB Scotland organisation. And I do need to emphasise that services will not be in any way diminished.
Just one more quick question. This meeting that Sandra Wilson referred to, that's taking place 3 weeks after the handover. It is a done deal, isn't it?
The RNIB Group Board, of which Sandra is a part, have made a decision that we will be moving forward with the current proposals from the 1st of September.
So it is a done deal.
However, we will, of course, continue to talk to members about how we implement those decisions. I'm very frustrated that what are actually line management changes are somehow being used as a political football, and not by RNIB members, but in the wider political arena. I'm very frustrated that blind and partially sighted people are being used as a political football, when actually what we need to get on with is supporting as many visually impaired people as possible.
Leslie Ann Alexander, CEO of the RNIB Group. We'd like your views, please. Now, we're always very much influenced in the items we cover by what you tell us. And I was very struck by this email that reached us a few days ago. It said, I was wondering if you could do a piece about people who've been blind all their lives, who are now also going deaf in old age. I've been a volunteer all my life, but can't now use a guide dog because I've lost my balance. I've always been known as a coper, but this idea is a bit daunting. In fact, it's completely frightening. Well, I also know from talking to blind contemporaries of mine that this is a fear and for some already a reality. I read this email to Liz Duncan, who runs services for people who've acquired deafness for the dual disability organisation Sense, and I asked her for her reaction.
I think the first thing to say is that it's important that people get their hearing checked and they get the appropriate support from audiology services so that they maximise what hearing they've got. Because most people who've been blind all of their lives are using their hearing. All of their coping strategies and their day-to-day strategies rely on maximising their hearing. So we need to try and encourage people to make best use of what's still there, if at all possible. And then after that, contact Sense, make a call, send us an email.
Can I stop you there? Because I have to be honest here, I'm in this situation a little bit. I'm beginning to notice I've got a slight hearing problem in one ear and it scares me. Yeah. But Sense, it wouldn't occur to me to go to Sense because we think of you as the deaf blind charity, and that's got a very clear profile and it doesn't feel like my profile.
No, and I can completely understand that. But the first thing to say is that Sense works with people with a very wide range of sight and hearing loss. And for us, the really important thing is the combination of sight and hearing loss. And so for somebody who's used to using their hearing to support their lack of vision, even a tiny hearing loss can begin to impact on your day-to-day, how you cope from day to day. And how positive you feel about yourself. You said yourself, it's scary. And it is for most people, and we recognise that, and Sense is very prepared to support people.
I mean, one of the things that our emailer said was it affected balance, and
yes.
That's something I've noticed. And the other thing I've noticed is I can't always tell where a sound is coming
yes.
from, because one ear is dominant now, or more dominant. It tends to imply that the sound has come, and, you know, one of the things you do as a blind person is you relate very much with hearing, looking in the right place, relating to other people. It's all that sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's absolutely critical, and that's why it's important to get appropriate support from audiology services in the first instance.
But the problem there is it is hard to know where to go for advice on this, because ear specialists know about ears, eye
That's
specialists
right.
know about eyes. The point this listener is making is that it's the way which this new disability interacts with the disability you've learnt how to deal with.
Absolutely, and we always say around deafblindness that the problem, it isn't 2 plus 2 equals 4, it's 2 plus 2 equals 10, because the sum of the problems is so much greater than just looking at the 2 sensory losses. It is difficult to get audiology services and ophthalmology services to understand how different your life is when your hearing is affected as well as your vision. And that's where Sense can be very supportive. We have locally based people who really do understand that, and they will support someone to get those messages across to other professionals.
Just to take an example, should you, for instance, be thinking of using a hearing aid? I mean, that might interfere with the methods you've used all your life to navigate.
It may well do, but using a hearing aid can help very much with the situation you described, Peter, of not understanding where sound is coming from or not being able to locate sound properly. It can also help with balance, because if you're more rooted, if your brain has more information about where it's getting sound from, it's easier for your brain to work out where your feet are, basically.
Right. So you can provide people on a local basis, because you know, I was thinking, well, maybe that you need a bit more mobility training to allow for what's going on. But, you know, one knows that local authorities are having a hard time finding mobility training for newly blind people.
They are indeed. And we do have people based locally who can help with that, and they will work with mobility instructors and local authority staff to develop their understanding of how the two things work together.
So people could just approach you as an organisation and say, I need to sit down and talk to somebody about this.
Very much so. That's very much what we're there for, yeah. And we would encourage people to do that, because it needs an individual solution. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Liz Duncan, and we'd very much welcome your experiences if you're going through this situation. Finally, some sad news. Visually impaired actor Kitty McGeever died last week at the age of 44. In a varied career in a challenging profession, one of the highlights was to play the first long-running blind character in a television soap. She was the roguish Lizzie in Emmerdale, and Kitty was rather roguish herself, as I discovered in a radio portrait we made about her for In Touch a few years ago. One of her many enthusiasms was collecting iconic clothes, and somehow during the making of the programme I managed to find myself burrowing around in her wardrobe.
I have a vast array of 1950s petticoats.
Oh my goodness.
Now look at those.
A mass of petticoats.
A mass, yeah.
I can't tell you the
So they're
last
like
time I saw petticoats.
Exactly.
Like
And I've got loads, and they're all different colours.
Why?
Because I love to wear dresses, and I love to wear dresses with a very full skirt, and they can turn just an ordinary kind of cotton dress with a full skirt into something that's quite wow. You know, I mean, these are as big as something like a flamenco dancer.
They are.
would wear.
They're very flouncy, aren't they? I think that's the word, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, flouncy. They
Flouncy.
are, but they look great.
I think I better go downstairs before we get too excited.
Oh yeah, you have a cup of tea and calm down.
Yeah,
Peter.
calm down. Just a flavour of the warmth and the humour of Kitty McGeever. That's it for today. You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk, and there's more on our website. From me, Peter White, producer Cheryl Gabriel and the team, goodbye.